11. I'll probably finish up this series tonight on what in the world is going on. Kind of different for me. I've never really preached a series like this where I actually, come out of other books, even more so in the Bible. Not something I'm necessarily comfortable with doing, but I couldn't get this off my mind, and I think the Lord blessed it last Sunday night. At least I hope He did. And I like the text to dictate what I preach, and I want to be a Bible preacher. But sometimes that means exposing the things that are going on around us. And as I mentioned last week, I by no means am, trying to browbeat you about the Lord coming back. Get ready. He's going to come back next week, and you better make sure you're ready. We need to be ready anyway.
Amen.
The angels in heaven don't even know, and the best I can do, I use the weatherman example, all I can do is tell you if conditions are right or not. I can't tell you if it's going to happen or not. Like I said, my prayer would be, the Lord send the greatest revival this world's ever seen and holds this evil back for another several hundred years, and I get to die an old man and reflect back on what God did in my lifetime. That'd be good, wouldn't it? I believe He can do it. But we looked specifically last week about the dangers of the church losing its saltiness. If salt loses its savor, salt is meant to hold back corruption. Before this refrigeration technology, salt was the best preservative they had. It added a great shelf life to meat and different things. And as the church, we're supposed to hold back corruption. We're the only group, organism, organization, whatever you want to call it. We're the only ones holding the corruption and the darkness of the world back. And I don't want it on my watch that we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Well, I told you that the next thing we're waiting for on the prophetic calendar is the rapture of the church. He's going to call us home, and the lost will be left here for 7 years on the earth. For the first 3.5 years, it's going to be peace and prosperity. The likes have never been seen on a worldwide scale. The Antichrist is going to come to power as a one-world leader possessed by Satan. The beast is going to be his military leader. The false prophet is going to be the one-world religious leader. And religion, in the false sense, has always been used as a means of control. And these things are not going to happen overnight. It's not like the rapture takes place and then, all these things happen. We're going to see these things coming together even before the rapture of the church. And so all this is taking place to roll out the red carpet for the Antichrist. And I mentioned specifically in Isaiah 14 that when it talks about Lucifer, before he became Satan, before he was cast out of heaven with a third of the angels, that his goal was to exalt his throne above the stars of God. It calls Satan the one that weakens the nations. He has a great interest in that, because if there's any strong sovereign nations, the Antichrist can't come to power as a one-world leader. And we talked specifically about the condition of the church in Nazi Germany that allowed Hitler to come to power, really essentially without firing a shot there at first. And what we can learn about the coming of Antichrist from the rise of Hitler, somewhat of a unique message. But man, what a similarity between the conditions in the American church versus Nazi Germany and the church there. I mean, if I hadn't have told you that I was reading about the church in Nazi Germany, you'd think I was talking about the church in America. The conditions are certainly right. And I told you this week, we talked about the religious aspect next week, and we're going to overlap a little bit of that tonight, but for the most part, I'm going to be talking about the political ramifications of this religious movement that we're seeing, because political revolutions always follow behind religious revolutions. I don't think it's ever happened the other way around. And what's so sad is, the Bible says that judgment must begin at the house of God. And so when we look at our country and we see the mess that society is in, that is a reflection of the church. It really is. The professed church, it really is sad. We're supposed to be the gatekeepers. But tonight, my base verse tonight is Psalm 11:3. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And we're seeing this in our country, and I want to talk about 3 specific attacks that we've seen. And I want to specifically talk about the infiltration of communism, Marxism, because it is the government of Satan. If there was ever a government system that was satanic in its origins, it is communism.
That's exactly right.
Because the government is God. I've read stories about Fidel Castro, the Cuban dictator. He's been dead for a few years now. But when he took power, what he would do every year, he would take the children who were just coming into school age, like the kindergarten age, and he would line them up in front of him. And he would say, what I want you to do, children, he said, I want you to pray to God. And I want you to ask Him for some candy. Pray to God. Cry out, scream, whatever you want Him to do. Ask Him for candy. See what He does. Of course, these children, just being obedient, they did it. Nothing happened. He said, now, children, I want you to see that nothing happened. He said, now, I want you to ask Fidel Castro for some candy. And of course, he had a truckload of candy, just showered them with candy. And he said, let that be a lesson to you for the rest of your life. Your rights, your blessings, your life, your breath, your food, your bread, they all come from Fidel Castro. I remember years ago, I was at a theme park close to the house, and we were standing in line for one of the rides, and we were standing in line next to some Asian people, and they had a very thick accent, so I knew they obviously weren't born in this country. And I got talking to them and witnessing to them and asking what they believed, and they said, the government is our God. And so that's what, if people get conditioned to believe that, then it comes as no surprise that a one-world leader could come to power if he can make these kind of promises. And so, how do we get to that place? I'm going to be leaning heavily upon a book entitled The Naked Communist, Exposing Communism and Restoring Freedom. And it was written by a man named Klotsky, and I can't recommend him for theological reasons. I mean, in fact, he actually taught for several years at BYU. I think he's buried in Salt Lake City, just died in 2006. But when it comes to communism, his work is unprecedented. He actually worked alongside Ronald Reagan to try to defeat communism. He was a special FBI agent. He knows what he's talking about. And anyway, keep in mind, this book is over 60 years old. But he was so accurate in his predictions that men had to come back behind him and actually show how what he said has come true. It's amazing. But specifically, he had a chapter called The 45 Goals of Communism. And years ago, this has been 60, 70 years ago, there was a group of people that got together and decided that if they were ever going to make America a communist nation, that it could never happen by force. And what they said was, a Judeo-Christian nation can never become communist by revolution, by force. It cannot happen. So what they had to do is patiently infiltrate the system, and Klotsky put these 45 goals that they had in mind, realizing it was going to take decades to work. And of these 45 goals, all but one of them have been fulfilled. All but one of them have come to pass. You know which one that hadn't come to pass yet? You might take a guess. Taking away the right to bear arms is the only one that has not been taken away. Now, here's the thing. Before I even get to the 45 goals, I want to talk about specifically the attack on the family, and some of these will line up with this. But the greatest enemy of Satan and the greatest enemy of this satanic government system of communism is the biblical nuclear family. You can't control a biblical nuclear family. They're not going to bow down and worship the government. They realize their rights come from God. The husband and father has his place. The mother has her place. And so there's no void to be filled there. And so the devil hates that. In fact, I find it interesting. When I was preaching through the book of Genesis, little Sandy, I came across Genesis 3. And I didn't plan for this to happen. But when I came across the text, it's just the way that it happened. I ended up preaching a series on the home and the family out of Genesis 3 because it occurred to me that the very first institution that Satan attacked was the family. Obviously, his goal was to get to God, but what did he do? He came to Eve while she was alone, while she was by herself. Who knows where Adam was or what he was doing, but here he came and he attacked the nuclear family. That's exactly what he did. You know, if Satan can get between you and your spouse, it's going to be a bad thing. And it's amazing how the Lord, took that thought and really ran with it. But the very first institution he attacked was that. And so in order to infiltrate this system into a country like America, you have to have a breakdown of the family. Have to. And so with that in mind, I want to go through some of these 45. But we're not going to do all of them. I got 12 of them I wanted to harp on. But you can look up this up for yourself. But I want to read kind of the intro of this. It's not super long, but a little lengthy. But man, it hits it on the head so much. But the purpose of the 45 goals. The general thrust of the 45 goals was to attack the Judeo-Christian underpinnings that had long prospered and protected freedom, and to replace them with the bricks, mortar, and top-down force of a purely socialistic society. Despite the fact that no such utopian society as pure socialism is possible, and that all prior attempts have destroyed civilizations for ages past, the communists and their supporters put forward the same formula anyway. The goal, after all, was not to advance human welfare, but to advance human control. The waiting game. Conquering a nation typically comes about in one of two ways. The first is to attack it militarily and compel the people to obedience. The second is to corrupt the institutions that keep the people unified and raise up leaders who promise to stabilize the chaos, establish order, and return a sense of security. America was too strong to conquer militarily. So the second process was undertaken, the process of corruption. Disconnecting America's institutions had to be approached very carefully with excruciating patience over time as they worked to degrade the culture, break down the family, destroy rule by law, politicize judicial relief, erase traditional values, and eliminate private property ownership. The ancient Chinese leader Shan Yang described this process in 350 BC, calling it weakening the people. What did we just read in Isaiah 14 about Satan weakening the nations? So that they could be more easily conquered by the elites. Weakening the American people gained momentum in the 1960s. As rebellion rose and support for traditional institutions fell out of favor, an atmosphere of anything goes, because that became the new norm. Parallel to this came increased crime, disorder, and dissatisfaction. The American people didn't turn to themselves for solutions. They turned to the government. This book's over 60 years old. Are y'all hearing this? It said the best solution came packaged as more laws, less freedom, more masters. A famous quote often attributed to Benjamin Franklin summarized this exact outcome. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. That's where America's headed. There is nothing new to this pattern. That's what I'm trying to get you all to understand. Satan has no new lies, no new methods, just new people to fool with the old ones. There's nothing new to this pattern. It is the proven path to eventually replace self-government with consolidated governmental power. This evolving new American order would serve as the foundation for a new world order. This is exactly what's happening. So with that, I want to get to the goals. I'll read through some of these goals. I will mention number 3, because number 3 is the only one of the 45 that has not been accomplished. Number 3 of the 45 goals of communism instituted in America. 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States will be a demonstration of moral strength. And I'll talk about this more later. I believe there's going to be a big push to do this. We've already seen a lot of it, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I may mention that later if we got time. But I want to go over some of these 45. Let's look at number 17. Number 17. Y'all forgive me, I'm scrolling through this. Goal number 17 for instituting communism in America. Get control of the schools. Use them as a transmission belt for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. We're seeing that on. I remember I went to public school from elementary all the way through middle school. And then in high school, I went to Christian school. But even when I was a kid growing up, the local PTA and the local elected school board ran the schools. When Obama got in office, one of the first things he did is he federalized the curriculum. Everything that's done in the schools comes out of Washington now. And nobody has control to stop that. You, as a teacher, or me as a bus driver, you can't buck the system. They're going to buck you. Get control. That's why, I'm not throwing rocks at people who send their kids to public school, and I understand sometimes it's absolutely necessary depending on the situation. But it's one thing that me and Leah talked about even before we got married. I just didn't want my kids to go to public school for that reason. It's not even about reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. It's about indoctrination. I mean, from the time they walk in the door. It's insane. Hitler once said, "Give me the keys to the youth, and I'll control the nation in a generation." Goal number 20. Some of this is mind-blowing. Goal 20. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, and policy-making positions. Lord knows we've seen that. It kind of shows how dated this book is. He didn't say anything about social media. Obviously, we didn't have any, but the concept is the same. Goal 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and pictures. Evidence of communist infiltration in the media is subjective. Some see Hollywood's changing values as a strategic change to keep the money coming. Others see a definite impact on the values of society as a whole. One major catastrophe is the demise of blockbuster movie giants that rose to influential prominence by promoting traditional American and Judeo-Christian themes. In their place came writers, producers, and directors who created movies, media content, and themes that celebrated the antithesis of traditional American values. And there's so much more I could read. I'm just trying to, for the second time, get some of the stuff in here. But if you really think about this, I mean, even now where we're at, let's just start from present day and go back. I cannot find a TV show without a homosexual in it. It's like almost, they would literally have to search these people out to find it. It doesn't matter. Cooking shows on Food Network, they're going to have one. We got into a survival show this week. I really was enjoying it. Lo and behold, there he is, talking about how excited he was to go get out of the woods to go see his boyfriend. It just makes me sick at my stomach. Cartoons now. You better watch what your kids watch on TV. The cartoons these days are insane. But even going back several years ago, there were TV shows that came out that just made this promiscuity and homosexuality the norm. But I really struggled to think, and if you can think of it, don't answer out loud, but come talk to me after service. I was curious. I could not think of a single TV show, sitcom, whatever, within the past probably 25 to 30 years that had a nuclear family with a strong male role model in it. I couldn't think of one. I really could not think of one. Most of them, if they do have a nuclear family, the dad's as goofy as all get out. Just pitiful. He's like a college frat boy. It makes me, get me fired up. And, but I couldn't think of one. That's by design. It's by design. Let me move on. Goal 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of American artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculptures from parks, buildings, and substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. Did you know that every Marxist revolution started out with a ripping down of statues and history and all? You know why that is? And it's also why, listen, they're not just tearing down Confederate monuments. They're getting rid of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. There's a push to get rid of Mount Rushmore. Why is that? It's because in order to bring in the new, you've got to destroy all remnants of the old. And I guarantee you the founding fathers would have locked and loaded a long time ago over this junk that we're seeing now. No wonder we won't get rid of them. Number 25. I got to hurry. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. 1959, the average American would not have believed what has happened to American morals and standards as a result of today's cultural breakdown. It gives a lot of stats about how it's affected marriages. I think it's just amazing how much this has affected the American home and the American family. And we're seeing it. They break down the cultural standards, break down the nuclear family. Number 26, present homosexuality. Now this is over 60 years old. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. We're to the place now you can't even say that you're for biblical marriage without somebody wanting to cut you down. That's where we're at. You can't even speak out against it. It's ridiculous. 27. Where am I? There we go. 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. And I hope you do understand, and I know y'all are smart enough to know this. Every building you pass that has a church sign on it ain't a church. Ain't a real one anyway. Everything that God does, Satan has a counterfeit for. And if his church not standing on the gospel, they're preaching a false social gospel. That's where we're at today. The goal number 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. 30. Discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Goal number 40. Discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. And 41 kind of piggybacks off that. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. And to paraphrase that, that is the old, it takes a village to raise a child. I think Hillary Clinton said that sometime a few years ago when she was running. Listen, it takes parents to raise a children.
That's right.
It don't take a village. I want the village. You think I want that village out there raising my kids? No. But they sure want it. Give us the kids.
Yeah.
It takes a village to raise a child. That's the concept. Anytime you hear that, that is Communism 101. Goal number 41. Number 42. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition. That students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, or social problems. Ergo, Black Lives Matter. It's what we're seeing today. In fact, I heard Cuomo say this the other night. Whenever the rioters were burning cities to the ground and attacking police officers and all the things that were going on, Cuomo said, this is a good thing. This is how this country got started. Really? No, it really wasn't. Not like that. But we see that. And this is where, and I'm running out of time. I'm taking way too long. But this is an attack on the family. It's an attack on society. It'll equal an attack on the church. And I promise you, if they ever get it to this point, that's what they want to do. They want to take homosexuality and turn it into such a civil rights issue that you can't even speak out about it from the pulpit. I mean, they're already doing that in Canada, different places in Europe. Preachers have been arrested for preaching in their pulpit against homosexuality. That's what they want it to come to. That's the leverage I believe they're trying to use. And all this results in a government takeover. When the church loses its saltiness and the communist message is more systematic and influential than the Christian message, it's going to happen. And this is where really the Black Lives Matter comes into all this. And I say this just because I'm always afraid that somebody's going to get a hold of my stuff and, copy and paste and edit it. But we understand black lives do matter. All black lives matter. All lives matter. There's no place for racism in the church. But I'm here to tell you, friend, there are individual racists out there. Listen, I come from the South. There are individual racists out there. But I'm telling you something. Systematic racism in this country is a myth akin to unicorns. It does not exist. Nobody can give me one example of systematic racism in the workplace, in the schoolhouse, when it comes to scholarships, government aid, whatever the case may be. It does not exist. They have to keep that stoked because they would be without a job if people actually believe that. Now, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, think about some of the goals of communism we've already talked about. Now, this is straight from the website of Black Lives Matter under the tab of what we believe. What does this have to do with racial justice? Let me read this. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege. That's a new word, but it just simply means straight. Cisgender. They want to dismantle cisgender privilege. What does that even mean? It says uplift black trans folk, especially black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. We build a space that affirms black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. Listen to this. What I tell you about one of their main goals was to destroy the nuclear family. Listen to this. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Let me break that down for you. Your kids don't belong to you. They belong to the village. Oh, it gets even better. We foster a queer-affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather, the belief that all in the world are heterosexual unless he, she, it, or they disclose otherwise. What does that have to do with racial injustice? Absolutely nothing. But it's got everything to do with communism, Marxism. You see, all these goals have been achieved except for removing our firearms from us. And if you think about it like this, all these years they've been filling up a gas can. They've been filling it up, filling up, filling up. And here Black Lives Matter come, they're like the lighter that's trying to get those vapors. I really believe that. I've been reading a book by Saul Alinsky, who the book is called Rules for Radicals. And he literally wrote a book to try to teach these communists, this young generation, how to take over. He gave them tips on how to do this. And one of the tips he gave, he said, use whatever you have and then cloak it in morality. In other words, no matter how bad it is, cloak it in morality, make it look like a cause, and people will fall in love with it. That's exactly what we're saying. Burn down a city. Well, it's about injustice. Really? One thing that's amazing about Saul Alinsky's book, and this just shows you how satanic this system is, Saul Alinsky dedicated his book to the very first rebel, Lucifer. Dedicated his book to Lucifer. Teaching people how to take over America with his communist junk. And I'll say this and I'm done. I've really got to get done. But just one more thought I want to give you. And listen, just please understand what I'm saying. What I'm about to say is not Bible, it's Brandon. I'm not making any kind of predictions for the future. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm no prophet. Again, God could flip a switch and we have revival and, none of this stuff even comes to pass. But I will say that if it ever does happen, if history repeats itself, it's going to happen like this. talking about our thought last week, how Hitler came to power like he did. I want to read just a couple more quotes from Lutzer, who I had last week. But he said, democracy might be preferable when times are good, but a dictatorship works best when times are bad. For Germany, the times were very, very bad. Another quote he has on this same thought, and I'll be done. But he said, talking about the rise of Hitler, the worldwide depression of 1929 gave Hitler the opportunity he sought. Revolutionary that he was, he could thrive only in bad times, when unemployment was high, inflation was rampant, and anger and mistrust were spreading throughout Germany. This was his time to capture the nation, not by war, but by constitutional means. One last line here. Anticipating the election. Now, oh man, this is so good. Think about the time we're in right now. Anticipating the election in March 1933 that he knew he could not win, Hitler apparently chose to create a crisis. On February 27, 1933, the Reichstag building in Berlin went up in flames. The evidence points to arson. Most probably Hitler's men forced a Dutchman named Martinus to enter into the building through a passage used for the heating system. At gunpoint, he set fire in the basement of the building, and soon the massive structure was in flames. He blamed the Jews for that. And that's when all of it started for the Jews. And when I look at the situation we're in, and I want to be very careful how I say this. I openly admit COVID-19 is a real virus. It's really killed people. All these things, not taken away from that at all. But when you look at the numbers, it's got a long, long way to catch up with even what the swine flu did in 2009. We didn't shut down anything. Yeah. In fact, it's unprecedented in the history of the world. Quarantines have happened before. That's when you isolate sick people. You don't shut down an entire world economy for a virus that has a 99.6% recovery rate. You don't do that. Yeah. At first it was, we gotta slant the curve. And then of course we supposedly did that, and then it was, these masks, we gotta do that. When does it end? And I will say this, if the Democrats have a chance against Donald Trump, they've got to destroy the economy, which is the best thing that he's got going for him. And we just better be careful. We better be prayed up. And we need to understand what's going around and say, well, what do we do? Well, I said this last week, we got to pray till it hurts. Because it's scary where we've come. It really is. We've got to engage the culture and not just stay in here. We got to engage the culture. We got to be a father to our children, a mother to our children. We got to be a spouse to our spouse. You probably never thought about the fact that you were fighting communism and Satanism just by being a family and doing what God told you to do and filling that role. Satan can only come in when those things go away. The government can only take control when those things go away. But we just really need to give these things to God because, listen, I was reading a quote by Martin Niemöller. Niemöller was Bonhoeffer's best friend. He got arrested, but he made it out of the war and lived a long life. I think he died in the 90s. But he finally, he was supported Hitler at first, and finally he realized what was going on. And he said, at first I didn't speak against Hitler because, he came for the communists. I wasn't a communist. Then he came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew. And then he said, by the time he came for me, I had nobody to stand up for me. And the point is, we can't wait until it just affects us before we do something about it. That day's coming. We need to try to do something about it now. We need to pray for God's help and God's hand. Would you stand?